when one of your prayers was answered?
Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know. I
Why
guess
wasn't when?
when I felt the really closest was when Randy was killed.
Mm-hmm.
That took a lot of courage.
Mm-hmm.
I felt bad because me and Randy had a rough time together. He didn't live the way I thought he should, and I used to get pretty sore about it and let him know that I didn't like it. And I felt a little bad ever since about some of the ways I treated him.
Relationships, yeah.
Our relationship.
But you felt like the spirit was real close to you
Yeah,
then.
and you know, I don't know whether you younger people have ever heard this or not. Mom and I were doing ceilings in the Logan Temple. And the fellow I buy these cascos from, the guy that started that business, Casper Merrill, was doing the ceiling this night. And he was stake president at the time. Well, anyway, when we got there, we lacked 2 young people for witnesses. He says, should we not do ceilings and go through a session, or shall I go down and see if I can get somebody or what? And we said that was up to him. He says, well, I have a feeling I should go down and get somebody. So he went downstairs, and after a few minutes he came up with 2 young men to be sealers. Now there was me and Mama, our ex-bishop and his wife, and a couple from Hiram, Lillenquist, that was taking turn at the altar. And Mom and I were at the altar first, and when we knelt down to the altar, he says, there's someone, he says, these people who were doing work for tonight are here to witness their ceiling done. And he says, there's someone with them that someone in this room should know. And then he went ahead and done the names we were supposed to do, and when we got up, the others had taken their turn, and when we knelt down again, he says to me, he says, did you lose a boy in Vietnam? And I says, yes. Well, he says, he's here with these people. And I could just feel the skin tighten on the back of my neck, and he laid his head down on the desk and cried for quite a long while. Finally, he got composure, and he done the names, and when we got down to the altar again, he says, I got a message for you two from your son. And he told us what it was. And then the next time we got down, he said to Mom, he says, that boy must have really loved you. He said he stood there with his neck around your neck, all the while we was doing, or arm around your neck, all the while we was doing these other names. I'll tell you, that was quite an experience. And I talked to Casper about 2 years ago. He comes to the temple all the time, and he's 97 years old now. And I says, Casper, do you remember the time that we had that experience in the temple? He says, I'll never forget it. But Karen and Randy were real thick. And Karen was having a rough time. Because Randy used to come home and he'd wake her up and they'd sit there on the bed and talk for hours. And so after this, we come home and we went up and woke Karen up and told her about it. And it kind of set her at peace. She didn't seem to be quite unstrung about it after that. So it was good for her. And we decided that we wasn't going to tell nobody. We'd just keep it as a family deal. But it was only a day or two till people was calling, hey, I hear that such and such happened. And each one would call, it got a little bigger, and it got a little bigger. And so you should have heard some of the stories we was getting about what happened there at the temple. So I asked the bishop one night, or one day, if I could have just a minute before sacrament meeting, that I wanted to put something straight. So he'd give me a minute, and I told the people just exactly what had happened and how it happened. And I says, please don't embellish it. I said, if you could hear the stories we're getting, we had people call us from Star Valley. We had people call us from Ogden and want to know about this deal we'd had at the temple. They'd heard such and such, and the stories had got so out of proportion that it had no resemblance of what had happened. And for, several years, why, we'd hardly ever go to town that what we didn't have one or two people at the hear that story of what had happened there at the temple.
Well, his message, Randy's message was that we were not to mourn for him anymore because it inhibited his work where he was. And he says, I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm happy.
He's a mechanic?
No.
Curious.
But anyway, that did make us feel better. We didn't think we'd mourned excessively, but we tried to do what he said.
Well, Daddy, do you feel like sharing poetry, or do you want to do it later?
I better do it later if I got to do it.
Okay. Mother, then we'll go on to you. Mom, tell me about the house you grew up in as a child. Childhood home.
Well, it was built brand new. It was built by Lehigh Olson from River Heights. And they said it was built out of the best lumber that you could buy at that time. So it was a nice home. It wasn't really large. There were only 2 bedrooms, and I did have to share my room occasionally with other children. So, but it was a lovely home.
How about your favorite?
He knows the oats is in there, and he'll come. And so I did, and I tried that a few times, and I caught him every time. Then one time I didn't take the pan, and he got wise to that right quick. And I chased him around the pasture till I was so tired I sat down on a rock and bawled. So anyway, I got him to the point to where he would lean down and eat out of the pan, and I'd get on his head and gotcha, put me right back on his back. So
tell me about some of your winter activities with that horse.
Dad made me a sleigh. He found a willow, a black willow, a big one with a bow in it. It was big enough so he could cut it in two, and he made runners for a sleigh out of it. And then he put boards on it and a thing up in front, so when the horse ran, the snow clods from his feet wouldn't fly back in my face. And he'd hitch him to the sleigh, and boy, I had fun. I'd also went skiing on barrel staves. You kids wouldn't even know what they were. Put a long rope on the saddle and go skiing up along the side of the road on those barrel staves.
Tell about your mother. Any special personality or character traits that you remember?
Mother was a fun maker. If ever there wasn't anything to do, she could surely think up something for us to do. This will be in my history. She used to make whistles for the boys out of green willows.
Oh yeah, she made it.
She'd tap them like this until they were loose, and she could turn them, and then she'd make a little dash underneath and cut a hole. And boy, they made a really neat whistle. And we always had a lot of fun. Mama never let things be dead for very long.
She always had this
we used to
big
make,
apple cookie jar.
Yeah.
We used to make a flute out of those whistles and get the end, and we could pull the end out and back and make different tones to it. Mother
was an excellent seamstress. I never had a store-bought dress until I was 18 years old, and my clothes were just like everyone else's. The cloth in those days was made so well that it could be turned to the other side, and it looked just like new fabric.